Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. We're seeing a couple of folks trickle in slowly. If you're here for the Data Governance Visionaries webinar about going beyond observability and compliance to unlock business value with Atlan, Anomalo, and Lovelytics, you're in the right spot. We'll just give folks a few more seconds to trickle in, but the recording will be available and sent to everyone after the call as well. So, first off, to kick us off, we're thrilled to have you join us for today's conversation. We're here to talk about the massive shifts underway in data governance, how AI is pushing data teams to rethink how they scale, how they align to business outcomes, and how they move from being a control function to a business enabler. So, I'm joined today by three amazing experts, each offering a unique perspective from the front lines of data quality, cataloging, and governance. We've got Eric Falthus from Lovelytics, who brings deep consulting and operational expertise in regulated industries. Austin Kranz from Atlan, who's helping Fortune 500 teams build modern data programs tied to value. And Daniel Shaw from Anomalo, who leads strategic alliances to scale data quality at some of the world's largest enterprises. And my name is Daria. I'm your moderator for today. Just to set the stage before we begin, you can ask questions at any time by submitting a question in the Q&A tool, and we'll seek to answer them throughout the webinar and leave time for dedicated Q&A at the very end. Along the way, we'll also be sure to cover some best practices, customer examples we're seeing, and success stories that are coming out of our enterprise customers across the range of industries that we serve. So with that, I'll get us started. And again, this is the Data Governance Visionaries webinar, going beyond observability and compliance to unlock business value. All right, so kicking off our very first topic for today, I think just to set the stage, the theme is really where we want to address the elephant in the room, how data teams are drowning. They're doing their best to keep the trains running, but in the age of AI and proprietary data, that reactive way of working isn't cutting it. So what's that new playbook that's actually scaling? And Daniel, I'll let you kick it off. My question for you is, why are you seeing rules-based approaches fall short in today's enterprise data landscape?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Darian. Great question. So, I mean, the short answer really is you can't hire your way out of bad data, and rules basically don't scale. Today's enterprise, as you mentioned, they're dealing with massive amounts of data, constantly changing, dozens of data sources, and rules-based data quality, manual checks just can't keep up. Rules only catch what you already know and what to look for. And as data evolves, those rules break. It's really hard to maintain those rules, and turning rules, basically, managing those rules creates a bottleneck. We take a different approach here. We use machine learning to automatically learn your data's pattern, detect unexpected changes. So basically, no rules required. So whether you've got billions of rows daily or you're using unstructured data for machine learning, we scale without needing to scale your team. So basically, rules are manual, brittle, and reactive. A great example of that actually is ADP. So they scaled from managing 700 rules to detecting over 16,000 data issues automatically with Anomalo. And that was without actually writing a single rule. They caught all of that with kind of less issues and less effort. I think you're on mute there, Daria.
That's super helpful. Could you give us an example of how anomaly detection with machine learning outperforms traditional monitoring?
Yeah, I'll probably give another customer example. So we had a very well-known pharmaceutical company that we're engaged with. They have 30,000 homegrown rules. So that's a lot of rules to manage. And they found that they could actually replace 11,000 of those with one automated check from Anomalo. So you can imagine the amount of time that they're able to save writing and maintaining 11,000 rules, and just removing that really would help them scale.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Austin, you've also previously said, though, that even if you have high quality data, if there's not trust, it's still not actionable. So how do you help teams establish that trust at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like you said, I think trust is uh, a little bit bigger of a topic than just data quality, right? Data quality is a huge input for trust. I think what we've seen a lot of times is data quality is foundational, and then customers will come to us and say, our users are still asking us, great, we see high quality data, but who built it? where did it come from? Where is it used? Is it certified? Did a team review this? And there's so many more pieces of, well, what ends up being metadata, but just really answers to questions that end users need to fully trust data. And so we almost need to build a system that actually handles this kind of data skepticism that happens to exist in a lot of organizations because, and let's face it, we've all been burned by trusting data that wasn't quite what we thought it was. And so I think, yeah, more holistically, trust has a lot of different ingredients beyond just the data quality elements. It's almost getting all these in line that is what customers are really looking for. So whether it's ownership, lineage, having the data quality metrics visible to the right consumers, and all the necessary just descriptions in general, I think are really important.
Mm. And how do you see that kind of automation coming into play across whether that's your metadata, your lineage, your workflows, just to enable faster decisions for data consumers?
Yeah, I think automation is the name of the game across every phase of the data and analytics pipeline. I mean, automation you could think of is just as simple as having a connector that automatically crawls and pulls in the metadata from your analytics state or data state. So whether it's your data warehouse, your BI tools, your pipeline tools, your DBTs, your data quality tools, right? We need to pull in all that metadata to have it visible first and foremost, and doing that in an automated way is an incredible time saving. Having metadata like lineage automatically populated from your source systems through your BI tools is incredible time saving for root cause analysis or even things like actually preventing things from happening in the first place. And I think automating workflows, data estates, we have customers with tens of millions of assets across their data estate, right? You can't possibly ask someone to manually sift through tens of millions of assets. So finding a way to automatically filter down lists and apply workflows for tags or definitions or updates is really important. And AI has been critical here too. No one wants to start from a blank slate, and sometimes getting people to document their data or their data products is something that's really challenging. So using AI to give them a starting point to say, here's what we think based on your organization and based on other descriptions. Here is what we think this table, this dashboard means. Here's a description, a README file, etc. And maybe one last thing on that. We talk about data consumers. If you want to know what is probably most exciting for me these days is that data consumers are not just people anymore. Data consumers are AI applications, AI agents. There are technologies that are consuming metadata now. And so all of that context that we needed for human consumption as well. With Atlan, we're doing things like opening up a dedicated MCP server. So if you want to pull Atlan metadata and actually use it as context in your AI models, that's a new data consumer. So we need to have quality metadata being pushed into new AI use cases like never before. So really excited about what we're doing with opening up the metadata lakehouse, as we might call it, or adding our dedicated MCP server so other tools can come in and effectively leverage Atlan metadata. So.
Well, Austin, Daniel, you've both sold me on the value of automation to do all of this, and I can't imagine humans kind of speaking to AI agents, for example, in the same way. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, popping this over to you, Eric, I know you've mentioned that a lot of orgs recognize they have a data problem, whether that's data quality or something else, but they don't know how big that problem is, and therefore it's not immediately actionable. How do you help them quantify or act on it?
No, and Daria, thanks thanks for allowing me to join, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this today. Correct. Quite often when I'm engaged with clients, the first question they have, or first question they'll ask me is, I know I have a data problem, but I have no idea where to start, or I have no idea how to quantify it. I have no idea where to find what I need to find. And as Daniel mentioned earlier, if you're just going with a rules-based approach, you're really only looking for the problems that you know may already exist. I'm creating data quality rule sets for columns that are out there. I have a suspicion, but you're not necessarily finding the entire problem. So with new tools that are available and new capabilities that are available to us to use things like machine learning techniques and AI techniques, we could do much deeper dives into data sets where we can find problems that have been existing for sometimes years. There have been situations that we found in the past where we found data quality problems that are in existence for greater than 20 years that nobody ever knew about, just by doing deep dives into their historical data and by doing a lot of profiling. At the end of the day, whenever you have data quality problems that are inherent, it really destroys your effort to drive a data-driven culture within your organization. If your users are struggling to trust their data, they're never going to feel comfortable enough to make decisions that are based on that data. So it's really, really critically important that data quality is right. Secondly, when I have organizations that approach me and they say, I'm very excited about AI use cases that are coming our way, and I immediately ask a couple of questions and I say, well, is the data available? And what's the quality of that data that would be used to supply that use case? And if the answers are usually no, and I don't know, and I'm uncomfortable to answer that question, then that's a problem that needs to be rectified straight away before you go deep into things like AI use cases, or even, as Austin was describing, agentic AI. Because at that point, your data foundation has to be right. It has to be complete. It has to be fortified. And if you haven't gone through those necessary steps, you're really going to be struggling to make those AI and those agentic use cases actually deliver value.
That makes a lot of sense. And you've also previously talked about, Eric, what it looks like to embed governance into your workflows. How do you help teams do that? And, what does that look like in, say, a day-to-day business process? Could you give us an example?
Yeah. So if we're having this conversation 5 years ago, the tools that are available, tools like Atlan, weren't really, they weren't there. We didn't have the things that were the tool sets that were allowing us to embed and to automate in ways that were necessary. And I always called it the academic experience of data governance. And it's why a lot of organizations sometimes have data governance fatigue. I can't tell you how many clients that I speak to are like, well, we tried to spin up DG once, twice. We got tired of it. We were having a ton of meetings. It didn't go anywhere. We weren't successful. The fact of the matter is that we're still talking about a three-legged stool: your people, your process, your technology. And the people and the process part of that is sometimes not a difficult thing. Sometimes people route to the cause. Hey, we understand that we want to govern our data. We feel like that's going to provide a strategic advantage for us. But you need the technical capability as that third leg of the stool for the entire thing to stand up in a balanced fashion. That technical capability through automation, through those capabilities, through automating workflows, to managing and expediting the data governance process is essential. Everybody has too much work to do today, myself included. Everybody else on this call has the same amount of work in front of them, and they're all wondering, how can I carve out more time in my day to perform data stewardship, to curate data products, to do all those things, right? How do I do this? Well, if we do not have automation, if we do not have advanced tools at the fingertips of our people who are accountable for data quality, who are accountable for metadata management, then we're not going to be successful, because everybody has too much on their plate already. And by asking a data steward to spend an unbelievable amount of time doing tasks in a non-automated fashion is really not the recipe for success that we're looking for. We have to leverage our tools today. We have to bring this automation to bear so that everybody can be successful and we can have that data governance experience that everybody wants to deliver.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're hearing the same thing from our customers, just in terms of how much time it's consuming, and it can't be an extracurricular activity. It needs to be something that's already built into your workflows and how you do data governance, whether that's federated, centralized, or distributed. So I see we've got a question in the Q&A. Let me just, I think we're releasing the question. And I'll just read aloud the question for those who are joining and might not be able to see the chat box. It is, does a declarative rules-based approach align well with data mesh adoption among distributed teams, or is an anomaly detection a better fit for adopting data domains and products? Daniel or Austin, does this fall within either of your domains?
I think it's about data quality rules. So, I mean, Daniel, I don't know if you want to take it first. I have an opinion on it, but
Yeah, so I think in terms of kind of anomaly detection and kind of data domains and products, I mean, really, we kind of see that people have kind of dozens of pipelines that they're running. They can't afford to be stuck, kind of firefighting. And this is where, we kind of feel like using that machine learning approach to kind of monitor your data automatically, no rules, no thresholds, really helps. So catching the problem first and focusing on building instead of babysitting.
All right, and Austin, what's your opinion on this?
No, I mean, I think it's going to be a mixture of both. I mean, there's a reason if you have declarative rules, it means you know you should be looking for something, which is amazing. So let's combine that wherever possible. I mean, I think data quality is going to be a mixture of business rules with actual like technical underlying just like is the data fit? So there's different metrics for data quality. So I think we can monitor what we do know. It's almost like the known knowns are declarative, right? But the anomaly detection is good for the known unknowns, and the whichever part of that matrix falls in the unknown category. And you're always going to be adding more to declarative rules. Some of the ones that you find through anomaly detection might be better suited for actually saying that, we actually have a clear understanding of what this should be now that we face this issue. So yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of both. As it relates to data domains and just data mesh in general, I think it is on the job of a modern data team to set up their domains for success as best as possible. And so I think pre-packaging as much of the guardrails as you possibly can is going to be something that will just expedite your push towards data mesh. But I always temper any data mesh conversation by saying that every domain is going to be at a very different level of maturity. We have some that are going to be very data literate and data self-sufficient and can probably execute 90% of the data pipeline on their own, whereas almost every large organization is in some transitionary period where, hey, the centralized team might still have to do 50% of the data pipeline and just deliver curated assets that already have all this checked and it's perfectly nice, neat data that the end users can just come pick up, add an analytics layer on top of and explore, and you'll have everything in between. It's quite the spectrum. So
Austin hit it right on the head, right? So if we're talking about a conversation where we're curating data products as part of a mesh environment, and we want to make sure that our data consumers that are availing themselves at a data marketplace to access those curated data products, they fully expect a product that they're going to access that is of high quality and is high usability. So we've curated that data product for them. Without the right data quality, without the ability to actually prove what the data quality is for that data product, we're going to have problems straight away. So it's important if we're in that decentralized environment where the domains are actually have some autonomy, that they're still performing their work, they're performing their curation requirements, but they're also they're able to produce and publish the fact that the assets that they are curating, that they're making available to their users, have that required data quality so that their users feel very comfortable and aren't wasting time worried about what they're using. They could just take it and go and be successful.
That makes a lot of sense. So in sum, it sounds like, Austin, based on what you're sharing, kind of the best data mesh implementations use a combination of both, right? For well understood business rules, things that need to be hard coded, definitely catching the known knowns. But for things that don't have explicit contracts that, struggle to scale, we might have coverage gaps for things we don't know, whether that's a schema drift or a distribution shift. That's where machine learning can really shine. So I love how we touched on the combination of people, process, and the right tools in place. And Eric, it sounds like you've got great experience also helping implement both the people and process side too. All right, I'll switch over to the next question we have from the audience, which is from Harsh. He asks, some attributes specific to automation that differentiates trusted data from great data quality. Do these attributes also include elements of organizational culture?
I'll try to answer that one best I can. I think when we're talking about implementation of data governance, implementation of governance across the enterprise, at the end of the day, it is a cultural experience. We're changing the culture of our organizations. And to do that effectively, there are other people, process items that are required to be successful. Change management. I tell a lot of folks that data governance programs really struggle when they don't do change management well. Because at the end of the day, we can still talk about tools and automation and the advent of AI and how that's making the stewardship experience easier, and how we're using tools to take deeper dives into data to really find answers that we've never had the chance to see before. But at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people. People are still at the root of all of our enterprises. And we have to help them get across that change management paradigm. And as we're building culture, as we're telling our users, hey, trust us, the data that you're going to use to make your data-driven decisions is going to be right. It's going to tell you the right story. And as we're driving that culture, then the ability to supply that culture with proper data, quality data, data that is democratized, it's cataloged so that you have the right definitions. You know exactly what you're working with. There are no surprises. There are no misunderstandings. If you do that, then that cultural experience begins to manifest itself. Again, I hear a lot of data, CDOs that I talk to that say, hey, we're building that data-driven culture here. And it's just all words until you put the actions in place to do it. But you can't forget that there are people that are a key part of that culture. And these activities that you undertake really drive that culture. And you're making a statement by putting all these tools in place that they can experience that culture and then begin to grow and thrive inside of it.
That's a wonderful point. I think, I know, Austin, I've heard you say this before. You can have great quality, but still not trust that data if people don't believe the data is timely, they don't know where it's coming from, they don't know how it's governed. So I think it's really important to build that into the way people are discovering data assets, their catalog. In terms of automation, though, I do think there are some very specific attributes that automation can help drive trusted data. So whether that's lineage tracking, data SLAs and freshness checks, change impact analysis, exposing trust signals directly inside your data catalog or audit trails. So they're things that are much more easily done by machines and machine learning than manual processes. So I think kind of building that process into the way you do things, whether that's through a tool and the features of the tool or through people and process, as Eric talked about, is super, super important. All right, so that clears out our Q&A for now. Let's move on then to the second main topic for today, which is the evolution of the Chief Data Officer, Chief Data Analytics Officer role and their alignment to business goals. There's a shift happening in that CDO, CDAO role from compliance kind of cop to growth driver. So I'm curious for this panel, how are today's data leaders aligning their teams with business outcomes and what does success actually look like? Austin, I'll start with you since you've mentioned the rise of kind of the data product manager. How is this trend changing how data teams work with the business?
Yeah, I think every couple of years, I mean, there's a lot of buzzwords that come out every year, and I think one of the ones that has stuck under the data mesh umbrella is data products. I think it's really given us a much clearer picture to say that, hey, we are building data and analytics artifacts for something, and we need to know what that something is. What is the business problem that these are built for? Who are we actually supporting? What is the life cycle or the lifespan of this analytics data use case? And so data products in general, just given, I think, data teams and business teams this common ground to come together and say, okay, we understand that there's a technical aspect to building this, but at the end of the day, it's being used to enable the business. And so I think that is a reflection also of just the journey of the chief data officer in general, where, if you would have talked about chief data officers even 5 years ago, 5+ years ago, I mean, you could count them probably on two hands 10 years ago. At first it was just a way to say, hey, data is a strategic priority. We should have someone comes in at the C level and actually focuses on what are we doing with data and analytics. And at first I think it was very tactical and technical. It was just getting our house in order, very data management focused. The next evolution of CDOs was more of, okay, the analytics piece. We need to add, there's actual insights that need to come from this data. It's not just about how much data we can store and move to the cloud. And then we get into this probably latest era of CDO, which is much more about we need someone who actually can tell us what are we doing with this data and how is it impacting our business. So the idea of a data product manager, I don't know if it's going to be a mainstream role over the next 2 to 5 years, but it's something I'm seeing coming up more and more, even without the explicit title. It's just somebody that is overseeing, and maybe it comes through the title of governance. I've seen a lot of governance managers who are essentially in charge of managing data as a product, where we're actually treating our data and analytics initiatives with a bit more prioritization based on business value and not just treating it like a backlog of tasks. So the data product manager role is exactly that. It's whenever you submit your request for some type of insight, let's make sure before I go commission a team or resources to build and execute on the technical elements of it, that there's actually a clear outcome we're striving for that's going to benefit our business goals. And so ultimately, if that is coming through a data and analytics organization, that would roll up into what is now a modern CDO. I end with like a spicy take. Not every CDO is that person, right? Like some CDOs are Arrow One CDOs who are coming on to keep the lights on, right? And so this is where culture meets maturity a lot of times, where companies can put in their annual reports that data is a big priority, but if they're not empowering their chief data officer in the right way, it's very hard for a kind of phase one CDO to move into that value oriented world because they need to capture the attention of the business leaders. So that's just what I've noticed with customers with this whole data product manager role, whether it's explicit or not. I mean, there's clearly a push towards we need to connect our data and analytics to business outcomes.
Well, always appreciate your spicy takes. I think one thing you touched on that's really interesting, and I'm hearing too in our customer conversations, is sometimes that CDO, right? They're coming from the top down, but the downstream business units that they're serving might have the context to actually prioritize and act on that data. And they don't already always share that kind of body of knowledge and context behind the data. So, how do you see, and are you seeing maybe strong CDOs enabling autonomy across the BUs that they serve for data as a product without losing alignment across the org? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I wish I had a better, it's like a classic Goldilocks situation here. I mean, the perfect scenario is you have some element of centralization that keeps best practices and standards in line, where you federate the actual day-to-day, what your business problems are. We can give you the infrastructure, the resources, the advice, the centers of excellence. We can centralize a lot of like, hey, here is the operating model you should go forth and conquer your business problems with data and analytics. Go for it. Like I said in the first topic, though, every domain that you're trying to do that with is at a different phase of their own maturity. Some have gone out and hired their own data engineers and analysts that would have otherwise been perfectly qualified to be on any centralized IT-centric data and analytics team, but they just happen to be hired by one of your business units. And so they're probably completely in line with what you're trying to push from standards, governance, this idea of prepping us for scale. Whereas others, are asking you, I need you to build me every dashboard that I submit a request for. They're still asking you to run data pools and things like that. It's kind of this journey towards self-service. So, I mean, when you ask like enabling autonomy, one, you have to be a great business partner as a CDO. I mean, a lot of the problems I run into with customers can be solved by a very simple 30-minute conversation of what are your actual priorities in the business. It's not a technical challenge, or the technical piece is not that hard to figure out. A lot of times it is just, can we get the right people to sit down with the business and understand their problems? And with all the AI in the world, I'm sure there's a way to expedite that, but I think at the end of the day, that piece is very much still human to human, understanding goals and factoring that into your workload. So
Absolutely. At the end of the day, that does come down to human alignment. And I think we've got the expert here, Eric, in terms of what that looks like to implement. Eric, I want to touch on, you've previously shared a kind of a wildfire mitigation example that I thought was really powerful. And it was specifically about applying kind of business value to industries that have high operational risk. Could you talk to us through that example?
We have the good fortune of working with some really strong and really forward-thinking organizations in the energy and utility space. And one of the great use cases that we have been working with one of our energy and utilities clients is around wildfire mitigation and how we can leverage data sources and some of these are publicly available data sources, like a number of different weather data sources, how we can create geospatial patterns so that we can combine the weather data with where wildfire potential exists, with where customers are residing, with where utilities assets are in place. There are a lot of places that have had bad wildfire experiences recently, and that's because they really weren't in a position where they could mitigate that risk. They couldn't turn off and de-energize power lines that were in harm's way of these wildfires, and it exacerbated the problem. And we've seen some bad examples about that recently. But some of our clients have been very forward thinking about this. And they're using their meteorology assets to create indices around where a fire prediction is a potential to take place based on wind, temperature, moisture, those things, taking all that into account, overlaying geographic capabilities so that they can really pinpoint where these things are taking place, and then aligning that data with customer data so they can make their customers aware of, hey, you're in a potential wildfire zone, you need to be alert for this. Okay, here are some shelters that you made, if you need to evacuate, here's where you can go. And also, we're potentially going to be shutting down your power line for safety purposes. So if you have health problems, if you have medical devices in your home or where you're located, we need you to get out now and get to a place where you can use those medical products so all those things that are being used to sustain your healthcare can be done without risk, and we can avoid all that. We also take vegetation management data. There may be drone flyovers of where vegetation crosses product lines. And if that vegetation catches fire, it could really impair a power asset that's out there. So you take all that data into account, and how do you leverage machine learning to do predictions on where wildfires could be taking place, where customers are at risk, where to schedule work crews to harden power lines, to harden your energy grid, to effectively maintain vegetation so it doesn't become part of the problem as well. All those things are required. But again, how strong is the data that I'm using? What's the quality of that data? Do I have all the data available to put into these models, right? We're so much smarter these days with the advent of data science and machine learning and AI and large language models. And again, it's the data governance fundamentals at the end of the day. What are we feeding into those models to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, I live in California where it's impossible to get fire insurance. And so in these types of projects, it really is mission critical to make sure you're collecting all the data that you need to give you the best predictive models possible. I want to shift gears a little bit. So, for data leaders in spaces like this that are highly regulated environments, how do they balance their dual mandate of enabling innovation while also staying compliant, right? Because sometimes those two goals might be as odds with each other. With one, you want to slow down, make sure it's the right frameworks, harden your processes. With the other, you're really trying to enable the rest of the business or your downstream data consumers to go act quickly on the data that they need to activate on.
I'm sorry, Darian. Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that a lot of the data leaders we interface with need to do is balancing that dual mandate. It's innovation and compliance at once. And some of those things, whether that's Gen AI innovations, seems to move at the speed of light. Other things like compliance take a long time to figure out. How are data leaders balancing those two things?
You're right, it's a balancing act. There, especially in highly regulated industries, financial services, utilities and energy, spaces that are extremely highly regulated, there is this requirement, hey, I've got to satisfy regulators. I have to make sure that our controls are in place to do all that. And at the same time, you have to sit in the chair of the data enabler. How do I use data strategically so that I'm enabling the business to be successful, that we can use this innovatively to achieve our priorities, to be a market leader in what we're doing? And it is a balancing act. It's a very delicate balancing act. The way that, and Austin mentioned this earlier, but the way I associate this and I speak about this is we're creating the guardrails. So those guardrails are the guardrails that are going to satisfy the regulatory requirements. They're going to satisfy those security and privacy and sensitivity requirements, those legal and ethical requirements. So we're going to put those guardrails in place. Traditionally, data governance was once viewed as the power of no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that because the DG team says so. And that is a black eye on the entire profession. That's a black eye on the entire concern. And we want to get away from that. Instead, what we want to do is place the guardrails put the guardrails in place and allow organizations to have the room and have the bandwidth to understand what they can do to use data as an enabler, to use the governance experience and capability to enable data-driven solutions, not saying no to everything that's out there. So those guardrails are in place because they're going to make the regulators happy. They're going to make the internal audit folks happy. They're going to put that control in place that's required. It's not going to be the Wild West out there. So you're comfortable with those guardrails, but at the same time, you have a big pathway between those guardrails that allows you to be innovative and to be successful and drive market leadership through innovation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now, switching over to you, Daniel, I know Anomalo also has some great customer proof points that illustrate how CDOs are balancing guardrails with innovation, how they're evolving with the role, as Austin mentioned, over the last 2 decades or so. So, could you speak to us maybe about an example that we have working with the CDO, how they're measuring success of their data quality improvements in terms of business outcomes?
Yeah, and I think just to kind of touch on Eric's point, we're seeing, CDOs not being the gatekeepers and having to kind of move to that enabler, but also enabling new teams as well. The AI teams is kind of, growing at the speed of light. They didn't exist several years ago. But a good example we have is Lebara, which is, for those of you who don't know, is a global telecommunication company. They manage a lot of complex, fast-moving data across, customer onboarding, billing, network usage, etc. Before us, they had a lot of data issues that actually impacted the customers. So billing errors, delays, inactivation, and just obviously unhappy customers. So real kind of business problems. With machine learning kind of first monitoring, they were able to catch a lot of those issues upstream before that actually impacted the end user, which is obviously great. And some of the success criteria that they used were reduced time to detection. So I think that's the big thing with data quality is you can actually add real kind of cost savings, real kind of time savings to that. So things that took maybe days, they now notice or flagged within hours. Lower incident volume was another one, so fewer downstream issues. So that actually meant, fewer escalations to their support team. They were able to measure how many support tickets they got. Obviously customer surveys, how happy were their customers as well. And then actually just across the business, improve trust in the data. As Eric mentioned, trust in the data, and I've seen this in my kind of evolution from, migrating data to the cloud to actually, another catalog provider. Trusting the data has been kind of key in that. So really delivering clean data for the team, finance team, business team to make faster decisions, with confidence as well. So those were just some success criteria that they saw. I think, overall, it was the faster resolution, fewer customer impacts, and more trust in their data that was really kind of the success criteria for Lebara.
Yeah, and just to put a pin on that then, could you share maybe an advice you might have for those CDOs looking to move beyond building the infrastructure of data and more towards measurable impact?
Yeah, and as Eric's mentioned there, it's been a real evolution. So it's been interesting for me to see this kind of evolution in the data space. I started my career at a ELT provider. So it was all about getting data into the cloud, into your kind of warehouse, like Databricks, for example. And we call that the modern data stack. And that was really kind of what everybody was excited about was getting data in. But over time, it really became an issue that just moving the data isn't enough. And myself and Eric have been speaking to a number of customers now where they've done that. They've moved the data, but they've been moving messy, broken data. And it's really been a case of kind of garbage in, garbage out, and actually creating at scale problems then as well. After that, I moved to a data catalog company. Apologies, Austin, not Atlan. But we were helping companies obviously organize their data and kind of understand it a bit more. But that still kind of created other issues as well. There still wasn't that trust in the data. So, it was lots of powerful tools, lots of kind of powerful tools in this modern stack, but there was still the same block as we were seeing. So a lot of customer conversations where, okay, we've migrated the data, we're rolling out a warehouse, we're doing a catalog deployment, but we still don't know what the use case is. We still don't know what we want to use the data for. And that's where I kind of came across this, me and Eric have been speaking about this modern data stack 2.0, where you get real value out of your data. So for me, the big shift was going from stack to kind of to value, and that led me actually to Anomalo. So yeah, we've really been seeing this kind of exciting kind of move from just kind of table stakes of moving the data to the cloud, but actually having data you can trust, that's governed, and that you actually get real value from as well, real use cases as well. Eric, I know we've spoken in length about this. I don't know if you've got any advice for some of the customers that we've been speaking to where they've done that migration journey and now they want to start getting some value out of their data. I don't know if what would be some of your kind of couple of points you would ask them?
Yeah, the things I would ask them is, what you've done that customer migration journey, right? You now have all the data in the cloud. It's ready to go. What do we plan to do with it? Okay, so what's your plan? What are your use cases? Have you thought them through? Have you evaluated them? Have you understood, or do you have an understanding of what the potential business value is for those use cases? Are you prioritizing the execution of those use cases based on creating that business value? All of us in the technology profession, we get criticized often because we do things for technology's sake. Hey, we're going to do this because it's cool. I'm bringing my data over here because it's awesome, right? And you feel so much better about that, and everybody shakes hands and high fives, and then we go our separate ways. Are we creating value? And that is the huge question. So now we've created that modern data, that modern technology stack, that modern data stack. We've done all this painstaking work to get all that there. We've created these dynamic data pipelines that are pumping data in. We now have more access to data and information and capability than we've ever had before. Can you please give me a good use case? Can you please show me what the value of that use case is? And then can we execute on that and test to see if we're actually delivering the value that we expect from it? And then can we course correct to do it? That is the part where the business needs to come into play, to shake hands and partner with the technology teams so that they can drive this execution successfully. It is a terribly unsuccessful environment when the business and technology teams don't talk to each other. They're in silos. Okay, just give me the data from my report. Boy, that's a heartbreaking thing to listen to. No, we should be mobilizing. We should be enabling the technology that we've created, the data that we've positioned, everything that we've done to enable us for success. And now we need to use it and take that the extra mile so we can really, really push it through these use cases and drive value. And that's the key.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of enabling businesses, we absolutely hear you. It's not just happening at the C level with the CDO, but it's also happening within data governance teams themselves. And so I want to transition to our last topic for today, which is the evolution of data governance specifically. And governance itself can sometimes get a bad rap internally. Maybe they're viewed as being slow, restrictive, bureaucratic. But today, with a lot of the companies that we get to work with, governance is really being reimagined as a driver for innovation and agility. So I want to dive into what this kind of governance as enablement looks like in practice. So Eric, I'll pop this back over to you if you don't mind. You've talked about governance living between the guardrails. What kinds of decisions should be automated versus human-led? Is there kind of a good rule or framework for this, or does it depend case by case?
We're in an interesting crossroads right now. So at Lovelytics, they're one of the top Databricks partners out there in the Databricks ecosystem. Databricks has a tool that is very important to them called Unity Catalog, which offers a lot of tremendous functionality within the cloud environment. It's also very important that we use technologies like Atlan and Anomalo to improve that experience. And by using those technologies together, you're creating one consistent pane of glass that is now going to drive that experience, that's going to enable those that are accountable, but enable those that are also consuming and using the data so that they can do it successfully, right? The analyst who has a very important job as far as providing analysis for their organization, driving all these things, they don't necessarily care about going to the Databricks platform and running SQL statements. They just want the data handed to them in a way that they can use it and they can be successful. They want to get it and go. And so we need to enable them, but it's the use of these technologies that makes it successful. For example, if I'm in my Atlan catalog and I'm connected to my Databricks Unity catalog and I've created data contracts, I'm now mining data lineage and I'm using Anomalo in collaboration with that. So now if I'm looking at data lineage within Atlan and I see that a transformation has a problem and Anomalo tells me immediately that that transformation has not performed its duties. It maybe something broke along the way. And I can look on the lineage map and I can see, okay, here's three errors that have happened on this data set during this transformation. That gives me immediate root cause analysis where I could see the problem, I could take care of it. Whereas before, we used to go into this cycle of, oh, we've got to investigate that. I've got to call a meeting with 15 people. I've got to get the technology people working on this. Is this a code 1 or code 2, code 3 problem that we need to solve? And by the time we've gone to 15 different meetings to try to determine root cause and solve problems and put new things into focus, the business opportunities come and gone. So using these tools now is giving us the true opportunity to enable. And that is exactly what we're trying to achieve. At the end of the day, data governance is an enablement opportunity. We're enabling data so they can be used successfully to drive data decisions, so it can be used successfully to drive outstanding and innovative business outcomes. And without the tool sets on board to really put those guardrails in place, but also to enable us to do stewardship in a very quick, efficient way to get those answers that we need immediately so we can solve all of our problems, that really drives that true enablement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you're working then with maybe a head of data governance or a CDO, how do you help them make that business case then for investing in governance as a value driver and not just a risk reducer?
Yeah, there's the old story about a client I once had where they were skeptical about a data set, and when we started performing data quality work on it, we found over 17 million errors in the data set, and that person essentially lost their mind. And I kept thinking about the head blowing up emoji when I was having that conversation with the person. But then we made it even more relevant, and we attached business value to it because we took those errors and we assigned a severity value to them. So the ones that were like the hottest errors, the ones that were the most pressing, what was the time required to fix them? How many people were required to fix that? How much analysis time was required? How much people time was actually lost because we had these errors? And we started putting value to them. And after a while, we took the value of those 17 million errors and we presented it to the person on the C-level person that was overseeing that part of their business. And she immediately said, okay, well, there's a lot more funding I'm going to give you guys to find more of these problems within our data qualities, because that's lost time, that's lost efficiency. It's time we'll never get back. And the time that we could be servicing our customers, the time that we could be enabling customers to have better outcomes, instead we're putting out data governance fires. And we don't want to do that. So that is really the true enablement story of how we can drive business value that speaks not just to, okay, we're running X data quality tests, we're seeing these many errors, our errors are reducing over time. That's awesome for data governance metrics, but it's not necessarily the metrics as far as how we judge the success of our business. So when we align those goals to actual business goals, we're going to sell more product, we're going to deliver more, we're going to deliver better customer experiences, we're going to our website, our customer website is going to have this much throughput. We're going to be able to take folks through a certain funnel and get them to the right place at the right time. Those are very, very constructive business goals that we can actually enable. And when your data governance metrics match those business goals, then you've now reached the secret sauce. But you can say, okay, we're enabling the true success of our business. We're going to make, because of this, we're going to sell more stuff. Because of this, we're going to deliver better customer satisfaction. And that's really the goal you need to get to at the end of the day.
That makes a lot of sense. I think, Anomalo also sees the same pattern where governance is really shifting from that compliance checkbox and aligning themselves to revenue enablement, if not just revenue goals. And so, Daniel, I'm curious to hear from you. Where have you seen that shift in governance going into a revenue enabler? And then I'd love for you to touch on maybe some Gen AI and machine learning use cases where trust is critical. Could you tell us a little bit more about how governance teams are ensuring those model outputs reliable and how they're aligning themselves to business value?
Yeah, we have a very large number of very well-known telecommunication customers who are using quality monitoring, not just to ensure clean billing records for compliance, but actually, as you mentioned, kind of proactively detecting and resolving data issues. That could delay, customer activations, churn, etc. And this really directly impacts, revenue and customer experience. So governance isn't just a checkbox anymore now. It's really about making sure that the data is ready for decisions, real-time action, saving customers, making sure customers are happy, monetizing those customers as well. What we're seeing and what I'm hearing from kind of governance teams, as you mentioned, is a kind of a shift, really. So Eric touched on this as well. We're seeing that shift from being a gatekeeper to kind of a true business enabler, especially with the generative AI and machine learning kind of in the mix. Governance teams are now being tasked with democratizing the data, making sure that all these teams, and they're fast-moving teams, and there's also this kind of new breed of AI teams that didn't exist, as we mentioned several years ago. ChatGPT, hasn't even been around for 3 years. They have requirements for data, kind of at the speed of light. So the challenge really is these kind of engineering and governance teams are moving at the speed of compliance, but creating kind of a bit of a friction between these teams that are moving at the speed of AI. So we're seeing this kind of data process that's built for kind of this slower world, and they need to try and keep up. So governance can't, just be about control. It has to be about delivering trusted data that's ready to use at the speed of AI. I think, between myself and Eric and Austin, we're hearing a lot more about AI use cases and these teams that really want to kind of trust the data, have it governed, and then have data ready at the fingertips. So really, automating data quality is what kind of comes down to giving you that kind of speed of business and AI data that that the teams are demanding without sacrificing trust. So you can't manually do that because you just can't keep up with the demands from these different teams. So that's where automating that monitoring and data quality and governance as well is where you see the benefits to keep up with the requirements from all those teams. So yeah, we're seeing that as a bit of a challenge for these governance teams and data leaders. They really need to produce those outputs.
That makes sense. Now, Austin, I've got one last question before we move over to our Q&A now that we're hitting close to the end of the hour. You've previously advocated for shifting governance left. What does that look like in a modern data product workflow, and how are your customers connecting those outcomes to business?
Yeah. So whenever I say shift governance to the left, I mean it's kind of in the name, I guess. It's shifting where we're going to implement governance and embed governance as far to the left, meaning in the data and analytics lifecycle as possible. So rather than waiting until we detect something downstream, a dashboard's broken, or we bring something to a board meeting and we actually use information that was incorrect, inaccurate, or just something broke and we didn't know it, we'd rather do that a bit more proactively. And so can we embed more checks and balances and more guardrails further upstream so we don't ever get into these scenarios where a consumer is kind of staring at information that isn't correct. I think as far as what does it look like in a modern workflow, I mean, this could be anything from monitoring for schema changes to just before a developer pushes a new change to the semantic layer into production, understanding how many downstream impacts that has. Using lineage metadata, we can actually identify, hey, if you make this change to a particular field, you're actually impacting 15 dashboards that people rely on every day. And so rather than, like I said, waiting until you stare at your dashboard and it's completely blank or you're just getting error messages, we can get ahead of that in a more proactive way. So ultimately, it's about being proactive, leveraging automation, and trying to go as far upstream as we possibly can with governance.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I'll open it up to Q&A now, and I see you have some good questions in the chat already. So I'll start with a two-part question, and this is a little bit long, so bear with me. This is from Deepak, and the first question is, can you recommend a structured 30, 60, 90-day plan for implementing data governance for an org that's just starting out? After identifying pain points and establishing a clear vision, what should be the right sequence of actions? For example, should we start with training or data literacy programs? Should we focus on discovery and building policies around the data? Is it better to build a data stewardship team first? Or should we prioritize implementing automation and tooling?
I'll take it. First and foremost, be AI proactive. This is your ChatGPT prompt. Put this into ChatGPT, review what it says. I guarantee you it'll be helpful, if not actionable. I think the bigger question behind this is, every one of your questions should be, my answer is yes. Now, when and why? Those are the questions you need to answer, which is just ultimately, what are you trying to accomplish with your business? What are your most high priority analytics use case based on what's going to impact the business? And then, yes, you probably will need a steward for that use case. You probably will need to you'll recognize some type of policies. Maybe there's foundational policies that apply to every use case, right? But do it in a way that's very incremental and kind of scoped correctly, rather than just saying holistically, do we need a stewardship program? Do we need a council? Do we need to implement automation and tooling? Like, these are all things that will become very clear, I think, once you're as clear on your business priorities and you've actually gone through this kind of exercise to figure out what's missing, where your gaps are. Do you even have the right people to implement this effectively? There's a lot of steps before you even start to think about evaluating a technology. Because the first thing, if you come to me and say, "Hey, we love Atlan, we'd love to have Atlan," I'm going to ask you all these questions. So I'm going to need some answers to them from you first too. But use ChatGPT too, or insert AI. We hope.
The consulting business is great when we have organizations that have purchased that technology and dropped it in, and they expected magic to happen overnight. It doesn't work like that. So when Austin said, a lot of those answers to those questions are yes, he's exactly right. It has to be done in concert with each other. But the big thing I would recommend is find that use case and deliver the use case. Don't try to boil the entire enterprise data governance ocean at one time, because if you do that, it's going to be too overwhelming. So find that use case, create your data governance paradigm in miniature in that use case. So you can use that to test how things are working, how we can improve things, and how you can then scale and roll that out to the rest of the organization. Tools, process, people are all part of that. So you have to implement them in concert with each other, but you have to get your operation working first. You have to identify the right people that can work within that use case, and you then deploy the technology so that you can deliver it effectively. But if you try to go for the Big Bang Theory and we're going to roll this out, you're really going to find yourself swimming upstream, and it's going to be very difficult for you to do that. You can't boil the ocean overnight, but find that use case, create your data governance capability in miniature, and then scale from that forward.
Great answers. And as a follow-up then to that question, let's say once these initiatives are in place, what kinds of key metrics should we use to evaluate the efficacy of our data governance program?
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel. I know you wanted to jump in on that, but I'll come in after you on that.
Yeah, no, and I think Eric, you keep touching on this. We talk about that kind of people process and creating those kind of key use cases. So having that operational governance, automating, monitoring alerts, measuring effectiveness. So tracking kind of metrics. So yeah, you want to track kind of the effectiveness of kind of your data governance. So a couple of key metrics that kind of spring to mind would be data quality KPIs. So clean data sets, anomaly frequency, policy adherence. And this is where that kind of integration, obviously with Atlan and Anomalo really kind of comes into play here. So kind of measuring data asset classification, lineage, steward engagement. How are people using like resolution time? How are they using the software? How often are they using it? Percentage of tickets closed. Tool adoption. We've had a number of customers where the companies actually incentivize or had a company bonus based on people using the solution. So actually getting that kind of adoption. So getting that adoption within the company of using the products and the governance tools that it would be, and then just user trust satisfaction. So like internal surveys. So those could be some kind of key data governance measures. Of the effectiveness of having that data governance policy there.
Wonderful. Well, we've got one last question before we close it out for the hour. And I want to make sure we get to the CT at the very end because we've got some complimentary consulting and a readiness assessment for everyone. But if we can quickly go over this question, Daniel, it's around how can we recognize when data quality issues are vetted and know which quality issues take priority, as not all issues are relevant to business. Where do data stewards play a role in this space?
Yeah, I think data stewards are really important in this. So, not all data quality issues impact the business. So you really need to know where you want to focus. So, Eric and Austin both mentioned this, there's a lot of free work that needs to kind of go into this. So high priority issues are the ones that affect key metrics, reports, decisions. So listing those out, kind of having those internal conversations. Data stewards can be key in this. They can really help verify alerts, and kind of help you connect with kind of the real business impacts as well. We obviously can help, flag these issues automatically and give you some context to kind of help speed up those resolutions. But you really need to kind of have that, team come by our moment, as it would be, and kind of have the team focus on what really matters to the business and kind of ignore a lot of the noise. So that's kind of my take on that. Eric, I know you've probably got some additional points. You come across this a lot of time where they're like, we have data quality issues, but we don't know which ones to kind of tackle first.
Yeah, we have data quality issues. We have no idea which ones exist, and we have no idea what the priority is on how to fix them. And so obviously, I always liken this to the person that goes to the doctor and they say, well, my arm hurts. And they take an x-ray of your arm and they go, well, sir, you have a broken arm. Now we're going to send you home. And like, wait a minute, what are you going to do about my arm? So you have to analyze, you have to understand, you have to get your arms around the problem. Once you understand that, and you're able to assess the severity of the problem, then you can actually do something about it. You can prioritize what the requirements are, what your needs are, what you have to jump on first, what has to be done after that. But you really need to analyze that problem. You can't just walk in with your eyes half open and say, I know we got a data quality issue, but I'm not able to quantify it. I'm not able to understand how severe it is. And that is immediately a manifestation of your problem. You've got to understand where these challenges lie, and then you have to prioritize your solutions on how you plan to fix them.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I suppose that wraps up our webinar for today. Before I let everyone go, I wanted to make sure we had the chance to invite the attendees today to join us live at the Databricks Data and AI Summit in San Francisco in about 6 weeks. You can meet us, of course, directly after the keynote on Tuesday, June 10th at the Anomalo booths with a free readiness assessment test from Atlan and Lovelytics. But also, we're offering a free complimentary 1-hour consultation if you're looking to get started with your data governance journey or you're tackling complex data quality issues. We want to give you a chance to kind of give us your specific custom solution and help us talk you through maybe how we're thinking about this and just apply it in practice. So all you have to do is scan the QR code on the screen to book your session with the team. Whether you're attending or not, this offer is open to everyone who's been part of this webinar. So spots are limited. Grab yours today. We'd love to connect in person. And that wraps up today's panel. Huge thanks again to Austin, Eric, and Daniel for your insights, and to all of you for the great questions and engagement. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.